So if you started using the GTO Ranges app at all, you may have noticed that some ranges have optional hands included. And you may be wondering, what are these optional hands and when should you actually take the option and use them versus when should you just stick to the default range? Let's talk about that today. Good morning, how we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And today I want to talk about optional ranges. And if you've used any of the ranges over at Red Chip Poker, be them in core or in a free download or now in the GTO Ranges app, you may have noticed that there are occasionally optional ranges. And just to be clear, you're not going to find these in the GTO specific stuff, not in the simplified GTO ranges or even in the raw GTO ranges. You will only find these in the exploitative. So we have to understand what the exploitative ranges are first, so that way we can really understand what the heck these optional subsets are. So unlike our GTO ranges, which first start by using a Preflop GTO solver, these exploitative ranges have been handcrafted by our coaches and then battle tested in smaller online games and smaller live cash games as well. So these things look at the common player pool mistakes that are out there, take things like rake into consideration and lots of other little factors, and then come out with something that is more exploitative focused and tailored to these kind of softer, smaller games. So it's important to understand these are not right out of the GTO solver. Exploitative ones are crafted with exploitative poker strategies in mind. So with that bit of context out of the way, let's look at range together. So let's go to the 6 max exploitative. We'll look at open raising from the cutoff specifically, and you notice here that we have two different ranges. We have the red, which is kind of your default definitive range, and then you have the optional open raising range hands in yellow. And at first glance, you should notice that there is a pretty sizable difference between these two ranges. If you use just the hands in red, the default range, you're looking at roughly a 23% open raising range from the cutoff, whereas if you include the red plus the optional yellows, now all of a sudden you're closer to 34% of hands, and that's a pretty large gap at the end of the day. Alright, so here is the Cliff Notes answer on when you should use one or the other. So the newer you are to poker, and the less confident you are in your pre-flop and post-flop edges, the more you should stick to the red default range of hands. They're a little bit tighter, a little more straightforward, keeps you out of trouble, life is nice and easy. If you are stronger in your edges, especially post-flop, or you're playing in a game that is pretty darn tight, so people are just going to fold a lot more against your open, then the more you can throw in the optional hands too. So essentially, the more you are new to this game and you're still working on developing your strategy, stick to the red, be a little bit tighter, more straightforward, nice and easy. If you are more confident, then you can expand out to the yellow, and you can take some of the yellow hands or all of the yellow hands. Just know that the red is going to be your default. For sure, play these hands, and then if you have some other reason, then you can start throwing in the yellows. But again, think about your edges and think about what kind of game you're throwing these yellows into. That's going to make the big difference here. And just to be honest, it felt incorrect to just give one or the other, right? We could have just given the red and called it a day, skipped the yellow, could have given the red and yellow together and just called that a singular range and been done with it, but it felt more correct to include both and give you the option based upon, again, the factors we already talked about to make a decision on which to use. So hopefully that kind of makes sense, and if you have any questions on that, please don't hesitate to leave a comment down below, or of course a thumbs up if you like having both of these ranges in the app. So there is one other situation where you're going to see these kind of optional ranges show up still in the exploitative ranges. Let's look at one together from the full ring or live cash. The exploitative side of things, or take a situation where we open the cutoff, the big blind 3-bets us, and action is back to us. We can 4-bet, we can call the 3-bet, or we can just fold. So let's see what range is suggested here. Notice that of this entire roughly 12% continuance range, we have the always 4-bet hands at roughly 2.4%. We have the always plus the optionals at 4.4%, and then the rest of the playable or continuance hands all get shunted into the call versus 3-bet range. Everything else, of course, would get folded. That's not included here. So what is going into these optional hands, right? These kind of yellow, could be 4-bet, could be calls. What goes into these? So first notice where these optional hands are, right? They're kind of right on the cusp between the aggressive and the passive action, between whether or not we should 4-bet them or call the 3-bet. And these are typically, because they're in the exploitative side of things, going to skew towards the depolarized guy's side. So notice we're looking at hands like ace queen off, ace jack suited, king queen suited, pocket queens, and not things like ace deuce suited, king eight suited, and jack nine off. So what goes into these optional hands is just like the previous situation. It's largely based on your comfort and your skill levels, what your preflop and your postflop edges are. That's going to be the major determining factor here. The more uncomfortable you are, the less you're able to really define your edges, the more I would probably take your tighter 4-betting range and go from there. If you are more confident, you have some sort of information that you can increase your 4-betting frequency overall, then of course take these optionals, throw them into your 4-betting range, call it a day, and enjoy and go from there. And at the end of the day, whether you decide to throw these optionals into your 4-bet or into your call versus 3-bet range, it's really important to understand that one of the problems that these ranges really aim to fix is newer players, ones that are now trying to play well, right? They've kind of escaped the I'm a pure fish part of the player journey, and now they're into the, okay, I'm trying to take this game a little bit seriously, I'm trying to suck less. They tend to overfold in spots like these, and a lot of these hands aren't even hands that they would default continue with, whether by 4-betting or calling the 3-bet. They would just overfold. So whether or not you call or 4-bet here, at least you're not overfolding, which is very, very important. So that's kind of the first and starter point, and then the next is just determining whether or not you should bump up your 4-betting frequency or just shunt these into your call versus 3-bet, utilize your position, and go forward from there post-flop. So those are the two major types of optional ranges that you are going to see within the GTO Ranges app. And just for the record, the actual GTO ranges, both the simplified ones and the raw GTO ranges, are not going to include any sort of optional ranges. They're just going to be static straight across the board, so keep that in mind. This is just going to be something you find in the exploitative subset of the ranges. So hopefully you now totally understand what these optional ranges are and when you should go one way or the other with them. If you have any comments or questions, please do not hesitate to leave a comment down below. And also remember, if you haven't already downloaded this app, you can get all of the open raising ranges, including the GTO open raising ranges, but even the 6 max exploitative we looked at earlier. All of that is totally for free with the app. You can get it today at redchip.app, or just look for the GTO Ranges app in your app store of choice. It is on Android and Apple devices as well. Again, if you need anything, do not hesitate to let me know, but I really hope you enjoy this app, and hopefully this helps you get even more out of it and fully understanding what these ranges are at the end of the day. Again, if you need anything, let me know. Otherwise, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.